Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me today for our latest Railbookers webinar, Discover the USA by Rail. My name's Sam. I'll be leading you through some of our most popular holidays to the States, trying to inspire perhaps for that next holiday abroad. So just before we jump into our holidays by rail to the States, just going to talk you through a little bit about who Railbookers are and what we do. I mean, it'll only take a couple of minutes. If you have seen these slides before, then I do apologize. Just indulge me for a few moments. But if this is your first time on one of our Railbookers webinars, it's a real good way to learn a little bit more about us and why perhaps some people come to us to help them with their holidays. So just to start, let's have a look at a couple of the benefits of using Railbookers and some of the ways that we actually are perhaps different from the crowd. So two at the top there, two graphics, they're book and travel from today to 2023. Now, I think that's especially interesting and important when looking at these larger holidays, perhaps out to the USA, because quite often you'll be planning these holidays, I suspect, quite a long way in advance, maybe into next summer, maybe even into 2023, especially if you're celebrating a special occasion, a birthday, an anniversary, and you're looking to plan a long way ahead. And often, if you're looking to book yourselves, these tickets, especially in Europe, can only be booked perhaps 3 to 6 months out. Across to the US, sometimes 9 to 10 months out. But we are able to book holidays all the way through up to 24 months out and start planning those for you right away. On the flip side, if you're somebody that as soon as the borders open to the destination that you're hoping to travel to, you're looking to get away, we can start looking at those trips right away. So if you're looking to travel next week, next month, then give us a call. We're able to give you an idea of exactly what's open right now and start to book those tickets, book those hotels, tours, and get you away ASAP. So we do book travel from today all the way through to 2023. And we also offer maximum flexibility and customization on all of our holidays. So the trips that you see today, the trips that you see on our website, in our brochures, they really are just examples of packages that you could take. But if you wanted to change them up, add different destinations, change the number of nights, we can do that for you. Really, it's all about you. It's your holiday after all. We're just here to make it as easy as possible for you to get it booked up so you can get away. And lastly, just to mention another one there, of course, we have the largest rail selection of any of the tour operators out there. So if there isn't something that you see today that takes your fancy, please don't worry. Take a look on our website and I'm sure there'll be something there for you. We do also have a host of brochures on the website that you can download if you wish. That Amtrak Vacations Rail Holidays one there for USA and Canada, of course, very pertinent to today's webinar. And we do have some that are closer to home, UK and Ireland and Scotland as well. Of course, a lot of people have been staying a bit closer to home over the last 12 months due to what's been going on. There's a cruise extensions brochure and also a luxury journeys brochure. Again, if you have got a special occasion, you're looking to travel on a luxury train, maybe the Venice Simplon Orient Express, then we have a brochure packed full of all of our luxury train holidays. And you can download any of those brochures from our website right now. I mentioned maximum flexibility earlier with our holidays. We also have a maximum flexibility policy that we're currently offering right now, which allows all of our customers who book new reservations up until the end of September to qualify for maximum flexibility, which gives you complete peace of mind on your bookings. It allows you up to 5 days prior to travel. So this is for bookings up to the end of September. If you're traveling next year, up to 5 days before travel, you can change with no cancellation fees, no change or cancellation fees at all. So if you're looking at a destination perhaps for later this year, October, November, and right now you feel like it's a good option and you want to get that booked up so you can secure it, but slightly closer to the time of travel, you decide actually it might not be right for you right now, maybe restrictions have changed, and we're allowing you up to 5 days before to be completely flexible and move the dates on that one, change it to next year, or receive the money back in a credit, no problem at all. So you won't lose any money at all if you decide to change your mind up to 5 days prior to travel. So that's a flexibility policy. As I say, currently runs to the end of September, although based on the circumstances, we may extend that. Just depends on how things go. We do have 24-hour support from our global offices. We have offices in London, the US, Canada, and Australia. And what this means really is, doesn't matter where you are in the world or what time of day it is, if you do need assistance or support from us while you're on your trip, you should be able to get hold of somebody. We do have a dedicated guest relations and after sales department to answer any of your queries while you're on your holidays. Just a quick look at some of our rail partners. As you would expect, we do partner with all the major operators across Europe and the United States. There you can see Amtrak, and in North America as well. We're up into Canada via rail there. This is partnerships allow us to make those special requests for you if you're looking for a particular side of the train, an upper, lower deck. It also allows us to get preferential pricing and, of course, to book those tickets post the release date to the public, which allows us to sell our holidays up to 24 months in advance, as I mentioned earlier. And just finally, how are rail operators maintaining a safe environment? So for now, they are still requiring facial coverings in stations and on trains for passengers and staff. Of course, they've increased cleaning and sanitation at stations and on board. That will continue now into the foreseeable future. One of the big changes, though, is most of the tickets that we now present are contactless. They are e-tickets through an email or on apps, much like a lot of the flight tickets have been over the last few years. You download it onto an app and you don't have the paper tickets any longer. You can print the paper tickets off, of course, if you wish, but a lot of the tickets now from the suppliers that we use do come to us in the form of an e-ticket. They aren't physical paper tickets. Okay, so let's take a look at our first holiday today. We're going to start by looking at a couple of our shorter options over into the US. A couple of our 9-night, 10-day trips, starting with the American Heritage. This is a fantastic itinerary to be able to explore. So some of those famous cities on the East Coast that you can see there, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, really does make the most of your time in these destinations as well. These are all day services, only a couple of hours between these destinations. You're not spending huge amounts of time on board the train. You're getting kind of 2 to 3 full days in each destination as well. So it's a real time saver. Of course, we include the accommodation, the rail travel. We also include lots of excursions, passes, hop-on, hop-off tickets as well to make sure that you make the most of your time when you're in these 4 destinations on the East Coast. So you start with 2 nights in Boston. In Boston, we include a city pass. Gives you admission to some of the most popular attractions, the Museum of Science, the Skywalk Observatory, just to name a couple. And we also include a hop-on, hop-off bus pass as well, a hop-on, hop-off sightseeing tour of the city. A lot of the cities, as you can imagine, and I'm sure you know, in the US, very vast, spread out. These hop-on, hop-off tickets act as your transport around the city. Obviously, a lot of people like to do as much of it on foot as possible, but if you do want to see all areas of the city within 2 days, then having the hop-on, hop-off ticket, included in the packages really helps you get around the city and see as much of it as possible. I would highly recommend, whilst in Boston as well, checking out the Freedom Trail and walking along the Freedom Trail. It's a journey into the revolutionary past of the city. And also Boston, very famous for its Italian-American neighborhood as well, the North End. Lots of excellent culinary opportunities there. And we do include a dinner at a local restaurant as well whilst you're in Boston for one of the nights. That's included as part of the holiday price. You have 3 nights then in New York, so kind of 2.5 full days to explore New York. Kind of speaks for itself. New York, I don't need to talk too much about it. We've got a fantastic picture there of Central Park. One of the things to mention, though, again, is that we do include the sightseeing tour, hop-on, hop-off, to get yourself around New York to those different boroughs, and also a city pass. Now, this will give you entrance and skip the line entrance to Empire State Building, American Museum of Natural History, Museum of Modern Art. So again, we know how precious your time is. We don't want you really in queues and maybe missing out on some of these must-see attractions. So we include the city pass as part of the cost, which allows you to access all the main attractions in the city. And again, we do include a dinner, and this is a wonderful dinner, actually. It's at the top of New York's only revolving rooftop restaurant. It's called The View. So it's a fantastic vantage point from which to view the city by night, and you've got a revolving restaurant. So if you've got a head for heights, it's fantastic. If not, well, maybe give it a go, see if you can overcome that fear. But the food's fantastic, and as you can imagine, the views are spectacular as well, and that's again included in the holiday for you. You'll also get to experience Philadelphia, a very, I suppose, cultural city, rich in American history and culture, often overlooked. Philadelphia when traveling down the East Coast. I think it's a real nice inclusion into this particular trip. The first capital of the United States, the birthplace of the American Constitution, offers a huge amount to see and to explore. It's got the Franklin Institute, Philadelphia Museum of Art as well, a Liberty observation deck, which again gives fantastic views over the city. And it is very famous for its art as well. It's got numerous sculptures, murals in the city as well, and it's said to feature more public art exhibits than any other city in the world. So very different experience, Philadelphia, than what you'll see in Boston and New York. Gives a bit of a different feel to the holiday, which is nice to see some diverse areas. So Philadelphia for a couple of nights as well before traveling on to Washington, D.C. Again, the hop-on, hop-off sightseeing tours included, Jefferson Memorial, the Smithsonian Museum as well. It's also got a really fascinating spy museum, which we include entrance into if that's something that you would be interested in yourselves. And then, of course, places like Lincoln Memorial, Capitol Hill, the Capitol Building, all included on the sightseeing tour that we offer. So 2 nights in Washington to end the trip. So that's our trip down the East Coast. That's Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. 9 nights, 10 days. And another 9-night, 10-day option that we have, one for any music lovers on today's webinar, is our jazz, blues, and rock and roll holiday. Very, very popular one, as you can imagine. A 10-day rail journey, as I say, perfect for music lovers. You've got the blues of Chicago, rock and roll in Memphis, and then the jazz scene in New Orleans. This is 2 nights Chicago, 2 Memphis, 3 New Orleans, and it does include 1 night on board Amtrak between Chicago and Memphis on board the City of New Orleans Amtrak service. So as I say, 9-night, 10 days. This one starts at £849 per person. Again, includes all hotels, train travel, and sightseeing for you as well. So you start with a couple of nights in Chicago. Chicago, known as the Windy City. I'm sure a lot of you will know this, but the Windy City, not because of the wind that gusts through it, but apparently because of the amount of hot air that the politicians used to spurt coming out of their mouths back in the day. That's apparently where it got its name, the Windy City, from all those years ago. We do include hop-on, hop-off sightseeing tour again in Chicago. Lots of great attractions, Navy Pier, Millennium Park, where you can see the beam structure that's the iconic structure that's so famous. The Magnificent Mile as well. You can walk down the John Hancock building. It's got a signature suite at the top where you can have a cocktail and look out over the city. Also very famous for its architecture. Chicago has a fantastic architectural river cruise. Was actually voted the #1 attraction in the US about 4 or 5 years ago. You can get to explore the architecture of Chicago from the river and how that the city was built around the river over the last 100 years. So doesn't come included in the package, that one, but I do like to mention it. It was something that I did myself a few years back, and yeah, an experience not to be missed, I think, when you're in Chicago. So then you hop on board the City of New Orleans train. You spend 1 night on the Amtrak services. We will take a look a bit later at the different levels of accommodation on board Amtrak, so don't worry, we won't skip over that. That will come just a little later on in the webinar. But now we'll move on to Memphis. Memphis, of course, famous for rock and roll. Elvis, of course, and we do include, as you would imagine, a tour of the iconic Graceland setting there. So that's actually part of a larger tour of Memphis. So you'll have a narrated tour where you discover Beale Street, Sun Studios as well, and then you'll have that Graceland tour tagged on to the end of that, where you'll get to see the things I suppose Elvis cherished most in the world and get a glimpse of his life at Graceland. Also a wonderful meditation garden, which is the final resting place of Elvis, actually, where you can spend a bit of time. But it's a really nice full day tour of Memphis and Graceland. And then, of course, you'll have a full day for yourself to explore the surrounding areas. Then it's a day service down to New Orleans. Excuse me, before that, we've got one of our hotels. So it's always nice for us to mention the hotels. We do have a broad range of hotels in all destinations, anything from a 3-star all the way through to 5-star luxury. So again, completely customizable and to suit your needs. For instance, if you had a special occasion that you were celebrating in New Orleans and you wanted a 5-star hotel in New Orleans, but you're happy with 3-star accommodation in Chicago and Memphis, that's absolutely fine. We can mix and match for you. It's completely up to you. One of the hotels that we do recommend, though, in Memphis is the Peabody Hotel. Very convenient location, as all of our hotels are, just a few blocks from Beale Street, very close to the Rock and Roll Museum, the National Civil Rights Museum just around the corner as well, as is Sun Studios, I mentioned earlier on. Peabody is a very, very historic hotel, and it has a time-honored tradition. It has something that's called the Duck Show, which some of you may have heard of. This may be new to some of you. It's quite a strange tradition, but they have the Peabody Ducks, which are actual living ducks, and they march to and from the Grand Lobby every day at 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. in a time-honored tradition dating back to 1933. And people flock from far and wide, believe it or not, to see the Peabody ducks every single day. But it's actually a fantastic hotel in its own right, and one of the hotels that we use quite regularly on this particular tour. So then, as I mentioned, I was getting ahead of myself, but we're moving on finally down to New Orleans. So you'll take the train down to New Orleans, have first evening to explore, a night at the hotel. And then that second morning, we start you off with a jazz brunch at a very famous restaurant called the Court of Two Sisters. You get a traditional New Orleans buffet brunch. So a lot of Southern food there. And then you sit in the courtyard and there's a fantastic jazz band that plays to you while you have your brunch. It's a really, really nice way to start your morning in New Orleans. After that, we do include a New Orleans city tour for you to get your bearings, take you around the French Quarter, Jackson Square, which is named after the previous president, Andrew Jackson, who fought at the Battle of New Orleans, which we'll actually come on to in a little bit, because you get to hear about that on one of the tours that we offer. So you get a really nice half-day tour in the afternoon of New Orleans city centre. And then the following day, one of my favourite tours that we offer, not just in the US, but across all of our packages, we offer a battlefield cruise on board an old-fashioned paddle wheel boat down the Mississippi. Really is a fantastic way to explore the river and to get a unique vantage point of the city. The captain on board is incredibly knowledgeable, very witty, a real raconteur. Will talk you through give you a detailed narration, I should probably say, of the history, the river, the culture. And you'll also disembark at a site which was host to the 1815 Battle of New Orleans, and you'll be taken out with a war historian, a battle historian, who will talk you through the battle and the history of that. So any history buffs here that are interested, especially in American history, it's a really, really fantastic tour coupled up with that paddle boat steamer down the Mississippi. So fantastic couple of days, 3 nights, 2 full days in New Orleans, lots packed in there, and a really, really nice way to end the holiday. Now, just to mention, at this point, you've probably seen we've gone through 2 of our trips here. There are no flights included in the price. That is correct. So the prices that we show here today include your rail travel, your hotels, all your tours. We don't include the flights, but we can book flights for you, should you wish. We know that some people like to book their own flights or use their own travel agents for their flights, or they have air miles. So we don't include that as part of the holiday. The flights are supposedly the easy part. But if you would like us to take care of those, we can definitely see if we can get any preferential rates, should you wish. So we have had those questions in the past after the webinar. People have said, do you include flights or not? Absolutely, just to put that out there now, we can book them for you, should you wish, no problem at all. So the third holiday we'll look at now is our Great American Majestic Landscapes. This one really allows you to enjoy the best of America from coast to coast, New York all the way through to San Francisco. So on this one, you've got 8 nights in the destinations themselves and 3 nights on board Amtrak, including 2 nights on board the California ZEPHYR, probably the most famous of all the American trains and routes in the US. That's a real highlight of this particular trip, is taking the California ZEPHYR between Chicago and Denver and then on to San Francisco. And we'll take a look at the train itself a bit later on in a bit more depth. So it starts in New York for 2 nights, all the same inclusions as we've already seen on the previous trip. You get your hop on, hop off pass, your city tour, your dinner at the View restaurant, and then off to Chicago for 2 nights as well, with all the inclusions, the dinner in Chicago, hop on, hop off tour. And as I mentioned, highly recommend that architectural river cruise. You can see some of the incredible architecture that lines the river of Chicago there. After Chicago, it's going to be off to Denver on the California ZEPHYR. Now, experienced travelers will quite often say the California ZEPHYR is one of, if not the most beautiful train trip in all of North America. I suppose others will say the Rocky Mountaineer service from Vancouver through to Jasper and Banff perhaps rivals it, but I think the California ZEPHYR, because of the diversity of the trip, perhaps just beats the Rocky Mountaineer for scenery. So it climbs through the heart of the Rockies. As you travel west, you go through the Sierra Nevadas, the plains of Nebraska as you enter Denver as well. As you enter Salt Lake City, this is the real highlight as you get through into the Rocky Mountains themselves. you'll head out to Sacramento and then on to San Francisco. The scenery kind of jaw-dropping from start to finish. It never really ends, the scenery. It's kind of 2 full spectacular days of, as I say, ever-changing plains, mountain scenery, all the way through to San Francisco as you reach the coast. So a real magical journey on board the California ZEPHYR. And firstly, that part of the journey will take you from Chicago through to Denver. You'll have 2 nights in Denver. A lovely city in itself, Denver, but really it's the perfect place to go out and explore the Rocky Mountain National Park. So we do include a full day tour out to the Rocky Mountain National Park when you're in Denver. This, as you can imagine, is one of the most popular tours that we offer in the US. It allows you to take in those incredible views of the Rocky Mountain range, get really up close and personal, even with some of the wildlife. So there'll be elks, moose, deer. You might even be lucky enough to see some black bears. Don't worry, you won't see any brown bears, any grizzly bears. They make sure that they keep you away from any areas where there are grizzly bears, but you might see some black bears. They're absolutely fine to see. I'm sure if any of you've been to Canada, into the Rocky Mountains out there, you might have seen some black bears yourself, but you may get a glimpse of them in the Rocky Mountain National Park tour. You'll also drive over what's known as the Berthoud Pass, where you'll summit the Continental Divide, which is around 11,000 feet above sea level. You'll visit the ski town of Winter Park, nice little cozy ski town there, and you'll also have lunch at an area called Great Lake, which, as the name suggests, is right beside a fantastic, lovely Grand Lake. And you have lunch there with a glass of wine or some bottle of beer, and you can just admire the Rocky Mountains as the backdrop of your lunch. So really fantastic full day tour out of Denver to the Rocky Mountain National Park. After your time in Denver, then it's back on the California ZEPHYR over to San Francisco. You're going to have 2 full days in San Francisco. One of those, you'll be able to explore the city yourself. And then we do also offer a full day touring 2 of the country's most famous wine growing regions, NAPA and Sonoma. So any of you really into your wine, this is a fantastic day out, sip on some delicious local wine. And as you can see, they're taking some of the gorgeous scenery that surrounds the wine country around San Francisco. And that finishes this particular tour. So that's kind of our east to west tour if you want to experience the California ZEPHYR, as well as, I suppose, 3 New York, Chicago, and San Francisco of the most popular destinations in the US. Really nice option for you, especially if you haven't got a full 2 weeks, because that one is only 11 nights, 12 days. Next trip we're going to look at now is a full 2 weeks. It's 13 nights, 14 days. It's our Grand National Parks with Yellowstone, Yosemite, and the Grand Canyon. Perhaps our most popular trip in the US, as you can imagine, for the very reason that includes 3 of the nation's greatest national parks, Yellowstone, Yosemite, and the Grand Canyon. It also, features the Great American West very heavily, the Great Plains of the American West, and the Rocky Mountains as well. So a huge amount included in this particular itinerary. As I mentioned, Yellowstone is the first stop there. The sprawling wonders of Yellowstone, we'll look at that in a bit more detail with its geysers and its multicolored pools of water. Then you've got Yosemite, of course, famous for its stony peaks, piney forests, El Capitan, and then finally the Grand Canyon itself, which ends the holiday with a completely unforgettable experience and a full guided tour of the south rim of the canyon. So this particular trip starts in Chicago, and then you're on the California ZEPHYR over to Salt Lake City. You'll have a night in Salt Lake City, and then there'll be a shuttle that takes you up to Yellowstone National Park. 2 nights in Yellowstone National Park on the outskirts of the park there, with 1 full day in the park itself, and you'll have a guided tour around the park. So the tour will allow you to experience everything that Yellowstone has to offer: the hot springs, the expansive forest, those flowing rivers. There's alpine lakes in there as well, and as I mentioned earlier, those famous geysers, Old Faithful being the most famous of them all, which goes off like clockwork once every, I can't remember how many minutes, but it goes off once every certain number, maybe 45 minutes or so, like clockwork. It's a fantastic spectacle while you're there. Also an abundance of wildlife at Yellowstone National Park: elks, bears, moose, and wolves as well. You're guaranteed to see some wolves at Yellowstone National Park. It really is an absolute wonder, Yellowstone. Of all the places I've visited in the US, Yellowstone perhaps is my favorite. I would say New Orleans was my favorite city. I think Yellowstone was my favorite tour, I must admit. After Yellowstone National Park, back to Salt Lake, and then it's off to San Francisco. You have 2 nights in San Francisco, and that includes the day tour out to Yosemite. So you don't get to stay in Yosemite National Park, but we do give you a full day tour out to Yosemite. Really, as I mentioned earlier, famous for those rocky peaks. We've got a picture there, I believe, of El Capitan, the most famous of all those ragged edged cliff tops there. Also, again, variety of wildlife and abundant forest, very famous for its pines, of course. If any of you are familiar with climbing, there's a fantastic documentary called Free Solo about a man named Alex Hanault who climbed to the top of El Capitan without any climbing equipment at all. He did it as a free climb. It's a fantastic documentary. It also gives you a great idea of what the surrounding areas of Yosemite are like and the scenery that you'll get to see. But if any of you are into that kind of thing, it's a quite fantastic documentary that you can find on there. But anyway, I digress somewhat. You get a full day tour of Yosemite included in this holiday. And then it's back to San Francisco and then down on the Coast Starlight service, a lovely service that takes you down the Pacific coast to Los Angeles. You'll spend just a night in Los Angeles on this particular tour. However, as I mentioned at the start of this webinar, all of our holidays are customizable. So you might be thinking, well, I need 3 or 4 days in Los Angeles. I need a bit of time to get to know the city. A lot of people say that about Los Angeles. You need a bit of time to understand Los Angeles. So you might ask for 3 or 4 nights. That's absolutely fine. We can extend these trips as you please. Just one thing to mention is that not all the Amtrak services run every single day. So these packages are built around the schedules. But if you wanted to extend your tours, then of course our experts will be able to match that up with the times that the Amtrak services go. So please do let us know if you'd like to extend time anywhere, Los Angeles being a great example of that. You'll leave Los Angeles, then you'll head over on an overnight Amtrak service again to Williams, where you'll spend the night before having a breakfast at a famous restaurant called the Fred Harvey restaurant. And it's from there you'll catch the train to the Grand Canyon on what's known as the Grand Canyon Railway. It's a classic train ride, runs through the largest, I believe, expanse of pine forest in the US, and some absolutely charming Southwest scenery, but it's definitely more than just a mode of transportation. It's a trip back in time, really. It's got some lovingly restored rail cars. There's entertaining musicians on there. They have cowboy characters on board, takes you back to the days of the Wild West. And then, of course, you've got observation cars and windows that allow you to see the ever-changing terrain from desert to prairie to pine. The scenery really is ever-changing. It's a fantastic experience. For me, the best way to reach the Grand Canyon is by the Grand Canyon Railway. It'll take you all the way to the south rim of the Grand Canyon, and then you'll have a tour of the Grand Canyon National Park itself with an expert guide who'll talk you through the history of the Grand Canyon, the way it was formed over millions of years from the waters of the Colorado River that carved the canyon into one of the wonders of the natural world. And again, speaks for itself, really, the Grand Canyon. You don't need me to go on and try and tempt you into visiting it. You know, I'm sure if it's part of the trip, you're more than happy to have a tour of the Grand Canyon, but this is all included in this particular holiday. And you also do have a night stay there on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. That's your final night's accommodation. After that, you'll travel back to Williams, where you'll pick up the overnight Amtrak service back to Chicago. So that's our Grand National Parks holiday. As I said, very, very popular trip indeed. That's a 14-day holiday around the US. And then finally, we're going to take a look at the All-American. This is the longest holiday that we offer currently across the US. It's really a loop from New York and back, 16 nights, 17 days. You see New York, then you travel south on the City of New Orleans train to New Orleans itself. You're going to take the Sunset Limited service then, and then onto the Coast Starlight up to San Francisco. It's 2 nights on board Amtrak services there, and then on the California ZEPHYR from San Francisco over to Chicago via Denver, and then 1 night again from Chicago to New York. So the time split here between time on board the train and time in the cities, but you do get to cover most of the most famous and most popular rail routes around America. So as I mentioned there, you get the City of New Orleans train, you get to travel on the Sunset Limited train, the Lakeshore Limited train, the Coast Starlight, and the California ZEPHYR. So, you know, the big five of the train world in the US. So I won't go into too much detail about this particular holiday. For any of you that are train lovers, want to experience, you know, what America has to offer by train and hit the majority of those rail routes that currently run, and you want to experience, of course, some of the most famous destinations there as well. This is a real nice option. It doesn't include the national parks. It does include, when you're in Denver, a trip out to the Rocky Mountain National Park just for a day. It doesn't include Yellowstone, Yosemite, and Grand Canyon. It's more about the rail experience, this one. So if that interests you, a real good option. Just to mention the Coast Starlight, we didn't speak about that earlier on. It's a fantastic journey, and you know, we've spoken a lot about the mountainous regions, the plains, the wooded areas, the prairies, the forest. Of course, America famous for the coastlines, the Pacific coast. So the Coast Starlight, which will travel on this particular journey up to San Francisco, will travel along stretches of the Pacific Ocean shoreline as well, with a stunning backdrop. So just to say, it's not all mountains and hills. There's some fantastic scenery by the side of the ocean, and you'll get that on this particular holiday. So while we're talking about the trains, let's have a look at some of the different types of accommodation that exist on board Amtrak. Now, the most basic level of accommodation, I don't have a picture of it on the webinar, is the coach seating. So for any train journeys that are just by day, we highly recommend just the coach seating. Of course, once you start to travel on the overnight services, the recommendation is to upgrade to one of the sleeping compartments. Now, you can stay in coach if you are looking for the most economical option. The coach seats do come with reclinable, not fully horizontal, but pretty close. You get a pillow and a blanket as well. I mean, they're relatively comfortable. But if you're looking for a nice relaxing trip across the US, then really we recommend upgrading to the roomettes or the bedrooms. And as soon as you do upgrade to one of the sleeping car options, all your meals are included as well. So some of the money that you pay to upgrade is often offset by the money you save by getting your breakfast, lunch, and dinner included in the price. Quite often that can account for 50% or sometimes 75% of the additional cost, especially if you're looking to book in advance, where you get some much better pricing on Amtrak trains. So the roomette is the most popular option. As I say, all meals included, gives you your privacy, gives you a locked door, your beds fold down to two sofas by day. You've got that window where you can watch the world go by from the comfort of your own roomette. Doesn't have the toilets, doesn't have the private showers, but of course they are there for you within the carriage. And if we just skip to the next slide, you can see here what it looks like by night with the bunks made up. And just down the end of the carriage, there'll be a communal bath and shower. So if you're happy to just have the privacy without the bath and shower, you don't need that. You're happy to walk 10, 15 feet down the corridor to use the shower or the toilet, then this is probably the best option. It's definitely the most economical option when it comes to having a sleeping compartment. As you can see, not the most spacious, nice and cozy. The main thing is you've got your own privacy and your own bed. So the step up from that is to the bedroom. The main difference with the bedroom is that it does give you the ensuite toilet and shower. So if that is important to you, or a necessity even, then you would need to be looking for the bedroom. As you can see, it's still set up with bunks, although the lower bunk is about 1.5 times the size of the beds in the roomette. So if the two of you and you're relatively small and you don't mind cozying up, then you can both fit on that bottom bunk, but probably it's more relaxing to have the bunk beds and not share. The room itself is also around about twice as large as the roomettes. By day, it's almost more like a lounge area that you've got. And again, those large windows. But as I say, really, it's about the ensuite. If you're happy without the ensuite, my recommendation would be to take the roomette, because you will save yourself a lot of money. If it is a necessity for you, go for the bedroom, because then you're going to get the toilet and the shower included. On all Amtrak services as well, they do have these fantastic observation carriages that you can see here with these great swivel chairs. Lovely place to spend a few hours watching the world go by, taking a nice book up there, have a glass of wine. You can't sit up there for the full day because there's not quite enough seats for everybody. So there's a bit of etiquette on board. Kind of have 2 or 3 hours at a time and let somebody else sit down and perhaps retire back to your roomette or your bedroom. But it's really nice area, nice communal area as well. You know, you get chatting to your fellow passengers. You can meet up and find out a bit about them and what brought them onto perhaps the California ZEPHYR or the Coast Starlight. Train travel can be a communal affair, and that's experienced as well when you're dining. Quite often the dining is set up as 4-seaters, so again you'll get to meet your fellow guests. And as I mentioned, as soon as you upgrade to the sleeping compartments, all your food on board is included. So your breakfast, lunch and dinner, depending on what time, of course, you're boarding and disembarking the train, will be included. It's all freshly prepared on board. Local produce as well. It's a la carte menu. For dinner, there'll be 3 courses. There'll have a meat option, a fish option, a vegetarian option, as you can imagine. But the food's really nice. It did surprise me, especially on those longer journeys. On the Sunset Limited, the California ZEPHYR, Coast Starlight, those longer journeys, the food's very, very good indeed. And again, really nice way to meet your fellow passengers. You do have the option of the 4-seater and the 2-seater. Of course, it depends what they have available, so you don't have to sit as a 4 if you don't wish to. If you'd like to eat in privacy, then you can have a 2-seater, but quite often people opt for the 4-seaters there so they can get chatting and meet some of the other travelers on board the train. Okay, so that concludes the webinar today. Hopefully it's given you an insight into what's possible when it comes to exploring the US by train, giving you an idea as to what life's like on board Amtrak and what Railbookers can offer you perhaps when it comes to your next holiday. So I am gonna give you a breather from me for the next couple of minutes, which I'm sure will be music to your ears, and give you a couple of moments just to ask any questions that you might have, anything I haven't covered, anything you'd like me to expand on perhaps. Just pop it into the questions box there and I'll do my best to answer as many of them as I can over the next 5 minutes or so. So I'll give you a couple of minutes and I'll be back with you. Thanks ever so much. Okay, thanks everybody. So just a couple of questions actually today. First one was from Peter. Thanks, Peter, asking about the tours that we provide and if they're group tours or whether they are private tours. Very good question, Peter. Thanks ever so much. So the tours out to the Rocky Mountain National Park, the up to Yellowstone, the Sonoma and Napa Valley, they are group tours. Quite often you'll be taken off in a shuttle. There'll be maybe 6 to 8 of you, I'd imagine, and taken off on the guided tour yourself. Also, any of the city tours that we have tend to be group tours. Some of the city tours at times can be booked as private. For those bigger ones, the private tours tend to be 5, 6, 7 times more expensive than the guided tours, which is why we include the guided tours in the packages. Actually, in Europe, we tend to have more of a range of private tours alongside guided tours. In the US, the majority of them do tend to be guided tours, guided group tours, not private tours, excuse me. So they are mainly group tours in the US. In Europe, as I say, we do have group tours, but we also have more private tours on offer as well. But appreciate the question. I can understand in these times some people are looking more for the private tours, and if that is the case, then just ask the question if you're inquiring about a particular holiday, and we can have a look and see what private tours there might be in the region for you. And the second question, final question, we do get this one quite a lot, comes to the hotels. Obviously, we looked at one of the hotels that we have, the Peabody, and Jane has asked if they have their own hotels in mind or their own accommodation. Can we book that for them, or do they have to go with the hotels that we provide? So good question, Jane. And the answer is we aren't able to book any hotel out there. We do work with a multitude of hotels in each of the major cities. As I mentioned earlier, anywhere from 3-star to 5-star luxury. First thing we'll do, of course, is to find out which hotel you're looking at and see if we can provide that one for you. If it isn't one that we have a relationship with and we work with regularly, then what we'll do is we'll try and find one that is as close and as similar to that one as possible for you. We'll ask you all sorts of questions about what it is you like about that particular hotel that you've picked. Is it the location? Is it the style? Is it the views? And then we'll try and find a hotel within our portfolio that fits around what you would like. Again, we try and be as customizable as we can. If, however, you have your own accommodation pre-booked, or you're staying with family, perhaps in one destination, you're staying with family in San Francisco, but you need us to book accommodation in Denver, Chicago, and New York, that's absolutely fine. We don't have to book accommodation everywhere. We can remove the accommodation in San Francisco if you're staying with family. Of course, we're not going to ask you to pay for 2 nights that you're not going to use. So hopefully that answers your question. And again, as I say, it all comes down to the flexibility and the customization that we try and offer on our holidays. Okay, so just the 2 questions this afternoon. Hopefully I covered everything else for you all, but as I mentioned earlier, anything that springs up after the webinar, don't hesitate to give us a call, and you can find out much more information on all of our holiday packages on the website. So just remains for me to say thank you ever so much for joining today. I've kept you from the glorious weather. I do hope some of you are listening to this outside, because where I am, it's a beautiful day. So again, I do really thank you for joining. I hope it's been informative. I hope giving a bit of inspiration. I hope to see you again sometime. So do enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe, everyone. Take care, and hopefully I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye now.